The US podcast industry made $1.5 billion from advertising last year. That makes it sound like a bonanza, but the reality is a lot more complicated. The lockdowns were good for the podcast industry. In 2019, 275 million people listened to a podcast at least once a month. Last year, that had increased to 384 million, and this year it's going to hit 424 million. The problem is that the number of podcasts increased more quickly. Pre-pandemic, Spotify hosted 450,000 podcasts. Now it's about 2.9 million. In other words, there was a 540% increase in the number of podcasts, but just a 40% increase in the size of the audience. Why is that? Well, partly it's to do with Spotify's business model. In music streaming, it has to give about 75% of revenue straight to the record labels. It's only fair. It's the labels and their musicians who actually produce the music. But it also explains why Spotify has never posted a profit on a net basis since it became a public company. Spotify's solution has been to pivot more towards podcasts. On the whole, they have a fixed cost that doesn't increase in lockstep with the number of listeners. That's why it's hiring big names like Joe Rogan, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. The idea is that it moves more towards a model similar to Netflix's. And of course, in podcasts, you can make money twice, from the subscription fee and advertising. But if it's a good deal for Spotify, is it also a good deal for those millions of podcasts? Well, the market is tough. Yes, advertising revenue is increasing, but not as quickly as the number of new podcasts. Back in 2019, US podcast advertising revenue hit $708 million, equivalent to about $1.5 million per podcast. Now that's more than doubled to $1.5 billion, but it averages out to just $500,000 per podcast. And of course, in reality, very few people are making anything near that sort of money. Most of the value is concentrated towards the top of the pyramid. The long tail of small podcasts with small audiences barely make any income at all. That's put a real premium on discoverability, or how easy it is to find your show. And it's also made Apple and Spotify into gatekeepers. There's a bit of a conflict of interest there, of course, because Apple and Spotify both produce their own content too. They have both the opportunity and the incentive to give their own shows preferential treatment. Here's Matt Deegan, the creative director of Folder Media, which produces some podcasts.
Will the curatorial places on Spotify become more about Spotify originals than they do about third-party content? Now, I don't think it'll ever go 100%, but already probably 20% of curatorial is to Spotify, and Spotify don't produce nearly anything like 20% of the big podcasts out there.
There's also little stopping them from following the playbook pioneered by social media companies. About a decade ago, brands and public figures alike were encouraged to build public profiles with the promise they'd be able to reach huge audiences. But over time, the algorithm was tweaked, meaning that you might have 1 million followers, but you'd only perhaps reach 1% of them if you didn't pay for more prominent placement. That's also another risk for podcasters, that it starts to become pay to play. Spotify's already doing this in the music space. Artists can pay to promote their new releases. In turn, that's why audio giants like the BBC and Luminary are building their own apps. They don't want to be beholden to the whims of the gatekeepers. There's a real contest for your ears, and they're turning up the volume.